Most people don't freeze because the cold was unbeatable. They freeze because they built the wrong fire, burned through their fuel, and lit themselves up like a target. That's the truth nobody wants to hear. Bigger flames do not mean better survival. Bigger flames mean wasted wood, more smoke, more light, and more eyes on your position. In a real grid-down night, that's not just sloppy. That's how you get found. Forget the garbage you saw on TV. In the real world, the man who builds the biggest fire is usually the man who panics first. He wants comfort fast, so he piles on wood, makes a bonfire, and tells himself he's safe because the flames look strong. But the ugly truth is this: a big fire can leave you colder than a small one, and it can do it while draining your fuel cache at the exact moment you can least afford it. In SHTF, that kind of mistake compounds. First you waste wood, then you lose heat, then you get desperate, then you start making worse decisions in the dark. Listen to me. The goal is not to build the most impressive fire. The goal is to get the most usable heat to your body while exposing as little light, smoke, and signature as possible. That is survival. That is fire discipline. And that is why military survival doctrine has been telling people for decades to build small, concentrated fires instead of oversized flame shows. Not because it looks tactical, because it works. The first reason is combustion efficiency. Most people never think about it. They just see wood burn and assume all that wood turned into warmth. Wrong. A fire burns in stages. First, the wood has to lose its moisture. That process steals heat from the flame instead of adding to it. Then the wood starts breaking down under high heat, releasing combustible gases. That's the real fuel. Methane, hydrogen, carbon monoxide. Then those gases ignite and release the heat you actually need. That third stage is where the money is. Now here's where the bonfire fails. A large open fire gets so hot at the center that the outer wood often never hits the right burn conditions evenly. So instead of getting clean combustion across the structure, you get half-burned edges, pockets of smoldering fuel, and thick smoke rolling off into the night. And smoke is not harmless. Smoke is wasted energy. Every dirty plume is fuel that should have become heat on your skin but escaped before it did the job. In a collapse, that's bad math. You're not just burning wood. You're burning time, calories, and options. A small, tight fire forces more of the fuel into the proper combustion zone at the same time. More gas burns, less energy gets thrown away. Less smoke, more heat per stick. That's the part people miss. You don't win by feeding the fire more wood. You win by making the wood burn cleaner and harder. A compact fire can hit dramatically higher efficiency than a sloppy bonfire. That means the same log can do almost twice the useful work if the structure is right. And in a real emergency, that matters more than comfort. That matters because fuel is security. Every stick you waste tonight is one less tomorrow. Every extra trip to gather wood is more noise, more movement, more exposure. Every long smoke plume at dawn is one more signal to desperate neighbors and wandering scavengers that somebody over here still has resources. That is why Greyman Firecraft matters. Low flame, tight control, no showmanship. So when someone tells you bigger fire means warmer night, understand what they're really saying. They don't understand how fire works, and they're gambling with the two things that matter most in cold survival: heat and concealment. And this gets worse when you understand the next piece. Because even if a bonfire produces more total energy, that still does not mean your body gets more warmth. Not even close. Here's what most people get dead wrong. Fire is not about total heat. It's about delivered heat. That's the only number that matters. You can have a giant blaze chewing through half a wood pile, and if that heat isn't reaching your body, then all you built was a beacon for looters and a heater for the sky. Your body gets heat from a fire in two ways: convection and radiation. Convection is the hot air moving around the fire. Sounds useful, but most of it rises straight up and leaves you. Hot air does what hot air always does. It climbs. Unless you plan on hovering over the flames like an idiot, convection is not what's keeping you alive. What you actually feel when you sit by a fire is radiant heat. Straight-line infrared energy hitting your skin. And radiant heat obeys one law that destroys the bonfire myth: the inverse square law. Simple version: double your distance from the fire and the heat hitting your body doesn't get cut in half. It drops to 1/4, not close to 1/4. Exactly that kind of collapse. Every foot you're forced to back away crushes the warmth you actually receive. That is where the large fire betrays you. A bonfire is too big to work close. The flames are wider, the heat is more chaotic, and the structure itself forces you back. So even if it's generating a lot of raw energy, you're too far away to harvest much of it. The fire gets bigger, your effective warmth gets worse, That's the trap. The size fools you. A compact fire flips that. You can sit close, 18 inches, 2 feet, maybe a little more, depending on wind and structure. That shorter distance changes everything. A smaller fire with less total output can hit your body with dramatically more radiant intensity just because you're close enough for the geometry to work in your favor. That's not opinion, that's physics. So let's stop talking like campers and start talking like survivors. If a small fire lets you sit at 2 feet and a bonfire forces you back to 8 feet, the smaller fire can deliver roughly 16 times more radiant intensity to your body. 16. Let that sink in. Less fuel, less light, less signature, more usable warmth. That's why big fire thinking is for people who want to feel safe, not people who want to stay alive. Now stack on the human factor, because this is where niche tourists get filtered out. In a real WROL night, your biggest threat is not the wind. It's people. Desperate people. Hungry people. Cold people. A big fire tells all of them the same thing. Somebody over there has warmth. Maybe food. Maybe gear. Maybe weak perimeter discipline. Maybe someone worth testing. That is why OPSEC matters even with something as basic as heat. A small fire is gray man firecraft. It keeps your profile low. It cuts the visible glow. It reduces smoke if you burn clean. It lets you keep warm without advertising that you exist. In a stable world, a bonfire is wasteful. In a collapse, it can be suicidal. So the right question is never, how big should my fire be? The right question is, how close can I safely get to the smallest, hottest, cleanest fire possible? That is how you think when warmth, fuel, and concealment all matter at once. And once you get that, the next step becomes obvious. If distance matters and efficiency matters, then airflow matters even more. Because the hottest small fire is not the one with the most wood. It's the one that breathes right. The single biggest variable in fire performance is oxygen, not your wood pile, not your ego. Oxygen. Control the airflow, and a small fire turns savage. Ignore airflow and you get smoke, weak heat, wasted fuel, and a glowing problem you have to keep feeding all night. That is loser math in a survival situation. Combustion is a chemical reaction between fuel gases and oxygen. That reaction is rate limited by whatever is in shortest supply. In a bad fire, that missing piece is almost always air. So when people build some oversized open pile and keep throwing logs on top, they're not making the fire stronger. They're choking parts of it while other parts burn hot. The result is chaos. One section flares, one section smolders, one section just sits there cooking without fully combusting. That's why big open fires always look like they're fighting themselves, because they are. A large bonfire drags air in from every side, but it does it in a sloppy, turbulent way. The fire's own heat scrambles the airflow. Oxygen-rich pockets and oxygen-poor pockets shift all through the structure. Some wood burns clean. Some wood just smokes and wastes itself. The whole thing becomes unstable and hungry. You keep feeding it because it looks impressive, but most of what you're feeding is not turning into useful heat. Now, here's the tactical shift. If you stop letting the fire breathe randomly and start directing the airflow, everything changes. Fresh air gets pulled straight to the hottest part of the burn zone. Combustion gets cleaner. Core temperature rises. Fuel lasts longer. Smoke drops. Signature drops. Output gets meaner. This is where a small fire stops acting like a weak little camp flame and starts behaving like a purpose-built heater. That is the logic behind the Dakota Fire Hole. And no, this is not just some bushcraft flex. Military survival schools have used this design for decades because it solves multiple problems at once. It burns hot. It burns efficiently. It stays concealed. In an urban collapse or rural bug-out, that combination matters more than comfort ever will. The setup is simple. 2 connected underground chambers, about 18 inches apart. One is the main burn chamber, roughly the size of a basketball and around a foot deep. That's where your fuel goes. The second is a smaller angled intake tunnel connecting into the base of the first chamber. That tunnel is the whole trick. As the fire burns, hot gases rise out of the main hole. That creates lower pressure at the base. Cooler air from outside gets pulled through the intake tunnel straight into that low pressure zone. Now you have a steady draft feeding the fire exactly where it needs oxygen most. No random gulps, no sloppy side drafting, no constant babysitting. The fire feeds itself. That means higher combustion temperature on less fuel than almost any open surface fire. And because most of the burn sits below ground, the light signature is dramatically reduced from the side. That matters. You are not out there trying to win points for aesthetics. You are trying to get through the night without attracting the wrong kind of attention. A small Dakota fire can outperform a much larger open fire while using a fraction of the wood. That means fewer trips to gather fuel, less movement, less noise, less exposure. If you're in a grid-down neighborhood or on the edge of a bad zone, that matters just as much as the heat itself. Every unnecessary movement is another chance to be seen. Every loud wood-gathering run is another chance to be tracked back to where you sleep. And let's be blunt, most people think of fire as comfort. That mindset gets people sloppy. You need to think of fire as controlled energy under strict discipline. Build it wrong and it drains your resources while exposing your position. Build it right and it becomes a low-signature survival tool. Now there's one more piece most people still miss, even after they understand combustion and airflow: shape. Because the way you arrange the fuel decides whether the fire keeps working for you or starts wasting energy again. Fire shape decides whether your heat stays useful or gets squandered. Most people never think about this. They stack wood however it falls, light it, and then spend the rest of the night compensating for a bad setup. More fuel, more adjustment, more smoke, more exposure. That's amateur behavior. Combustion happens where hot fuel gases meet oxygen. That boundary is where the energy gets released. So if you want more heat from less wood, you need a shape that exposes more active burn surface while still letting air move cleanly through the structure. That is why the Tipi layout works so much better than a random pile or a giant log heap. A Tipi fire puts the fuel in a cone, apex up, with every stick facing the hot center and the incoming airflow at the same time. Air gets drawn in from below, heat rises through the core. The whole structure burns more evenly. There's less dead interior, less oxygen starvation, less wasted fuel. Instead of a fat fire choking on itself, you get a compact structure where more of the wood is actually doing its job. And the Tipi does something else that matters. It throws radiant heat in a more useful arc. A sloppy flat fire sprays heat everywhere, up into the sky, down into the ground, sideways into empty dark. A Tipi concentrates more of that output forward, toward where you're actually sitting. Same fuel, better aim. In survival, aim matters. Now crush it with the fuel to heat math. Dry hardwood contains a fixed amount of chemical energy. That number doesn't care how you feel. The wood stores what it stores. The only thing you control is how much of that stored energy becomes useful warmth on your body. A big open bonfire at poor efficiency can burn a massive amount of wood and still send most of its heat upward, outward, or off as smoke. By the time bad combustion, forced distance, and wide radiant spread take their cut, the amount that actually reaches you can be pathetic. A compact Tipi fire, or Dakota hole, flips that equation. Cleaner burn, better proximity, better geometry, less waste. More of the energy lands where it matters. That means more warmth per log and less signature per hour. That is exactly what you want when fuel is limited and attention is dangerous. Wind makes the difference even uglier for the bonfire crowd. Large surface fires get disrupted by crosswind. The burn plume gets thrown off. The windward side cools down. Combustion destabilizes. But a Dakota Fire Hole is mostly protected underground. Surface wind can't rip apart the combustion zone. If the intake faces the prevailing wind, that same wind can even improve the draft and make the fire burn hotter. So, the very condition that weakens an open fire can strengthen the right fire. Placement matters too. Put a small controlled fire in front of a reflective surface like rock, packed snow, or a fallen log, and you get bounced radiant heat coming back at you from a second angle. Now the same fuel load is warming you twice. That is smart. A big, clumsy bonfire can't use that trick nearly as well because it's too large, too far, and too wasteful. So here's the final truth. A compact fire built with intention beats a bonfire in every metric that actually matters for survival. Higher combustion efficiency, better oxygen delivery, better radiant geometry, better wind performance, better concealment, better fuel discipline, lower profile, less smoke, less light, more heat where you need it. In a real collapse, that matters because survival is not about looking powerful. It's about staying warm without being seen, staying efficient without getting desperate, and staying disciplined while everybody else does stupid things in the dark. Big fire is emotion. Small fire is control, and control is what keeps you alive.